The James S. Brady press briefing room inside the White House was more crowded than usual that afternoon. Reporters sat shoulder to shoulder, notebooks open, cameras aimed, waiting for the president to appear. The air was heavy with anticipation, the kind of silence that hums right before a storm. Suddenly, the doors swung open. President Donald Trump strode in, his posture stiff, his jaw tight, and his signature red tie swaying slightly with each step. His eyes swept across the room, scanning the crowd as though he were entering a battlefield rather than a press briefing. Trump gripped the sides of the podium, leaning forward with the authority of a man ready for a fight. His voice came out sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Barack Obama," he said, pausing just long enough for every head in the room to rise, "has been one of the most divisive figures in American history. And for the good of this nation, he should stay silent. His time is over." For a split second, the room seemed to stop breathing. Reporters froze in their seats, pens suspended above notepads, eyes darting to one another as if to ask, did he really just say that? The only sound was the mechanical click of cameras capturing every frame of the moment. Then the silence broke. Whispers erupted, keyboards clattered, and phones lit up like wildfire. Tweets, alerts, and headlines spread at lightning speed. Across the country, living rooms, diners, and college dorms lit up with breaking news. The headline was clear, blunt, and explosive. Trump had just told Obama to be quiet. Within minutes of Trump's explosive statement, a wave of shock rippled across the country. News alerts blared on smartphones, televisions cut into live programming, and social media erupted like wildfire. In a small bar on the outskirts of Phoenix, a group of college students huddled around a flat-screen TV. Their beers sat untouched as they argued furiously. One student, a political science major named Devin, slammed his palm on the counter. "He can't just tell Obama to shut up, that's insane," across from him. Another student shook his head, replying, "No, man, maybe he's right. Maybe it's time Obama steps back." The argument drew in the entire bar, voices overlapping, everyone choosing a side. Meanwhile, in Akron, Ohio, retired teacher Laura Whitman sat frozen on her couch, remote in hand. Her brows furrowed as she whispered softly to her husband, "Did he really just say that?" Michael, her husband, shook his head slowly and muttered, This isn't going to sit well with people." Farther away in Kansas, inside a dusty roadside diner, a group of truck drivers gathered around a small radio, playing live news updates. One of them, Pete Henderson, slammed his coffee mug down so hard it splashed across the counter. His voice boomed over the chatter. He told Obama to stay silent. "Does he think we're just going to accept that?" The other drivers nodded, exchanging heated remarks, their frustration boiling over. And in New York City, in the middle of a bustling newsroom, editors barked orders while reporters typed furiously to get the headline out first. On Wall Street, traders stopped mid-call, staring at live TV tickers flashing the breaking news. Across America, one thing became clear. Trump's words had set off a political earthquake. Families debated over dinner, office workers huddled around screens and social feeds, split into chaos. The country wasn't just watching anymore, it was taking sides. Inside the Oval Office, just minutes after leaving the podium, President Trump leaned back in his chair with a confident smirk. His aides surrounded him, reading breaking news alerts flashing on their phones. Trump folded his arms and said with satisfaction, "That'll shut him up. People are finally going to see who's in charge." His closest advisors exchanged quick glances but said nothing. Some nodded cautiously, others stared at the floor. They knew the president believed he had cornered Obama, but deep down, a few sensed something bigger was brewing. Out in the West Wing, chaos erupted. Phones rang non-stop, reporters camped outside, and White House staff scrambled to manage the media fallout. Headlines plastered across every major network read, "Trump tells Obama to be quiet." Trump, however, felt untouchable. He was convinced this moment was his victory, a decisive strike that would finally silence Obama once and for all. But what no one realized, not even Trump himself, was that this bold attack had set something in motion, something far bigger than anyone anticipated. In trying to silence Obama, Trump had unknowingly ignited one of the most explosive political battles since taking office, a battle that would split the nation, shake Washington, and force Obama back into the spotlight in a way no one saw coming. The quiet of the Obama residence in Washington felt heavier than usual that evening. Outside, the city hummed faintly, but inside, time seemed to slow. The soft glow of a single lamp illuminated the study, casting long shadows across stacks of papers, books, and framed photographs of another era. Barack Obama sat at his wooden desk, his posture straight, but his expression distant, his fingers lightly tapping against the armrest. His gaze was fixed on the window where the fading sunlight reflected against the glass, but his thoughts were miles away. Across the room, a flat-screen TV played the same clip on repeat. Trump standing at the White House podium, declaring in his sharp, cutting voice, "For the good of this nation, Barack Obama should stay silent. His time is over." The words filled the room like an echo that refused to fade. Obama's jaw tightened, his lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't speak. Michelle stood quietly by the doorway, her arms folded, her expression unreadable. She had seen her husband handle countless storms before, but she also knew this one was different. She didn't rush to comfort him. She didn't interrupt his thoughts. She just stood there, silent, steady, present. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. The only sounds were the low hum of the television and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Outside, America roared with debate. Inside this house, there was only silence, the kind of silence that comes before a decision that could change everything. The silence between them stretched until Michelle finally broke it. She walked slowly into the study, her soft footsteps muffled against the hardwood floor. The TV behind Obama continued to replay Trump's words, but Michelle's voice carried louder than any headline. She stood next to his desk, her arms gently folded, and spoke in a calm, steady tone, the kind of voice that didn't demand attention, but naturally commanded it. "Sometimes," she said softly, her eyes fixed on his, "silence speaks louder than any words ever could." Obama's gaze shifted from the window to her face. He didn't reply, but the weight of her words sank deep. The tension in his shoulders eased just slightly, yet his jaw remained tight, his mind racing with unspoken thoughts. Michelle sat down across from him, leaning forward on the edge of her chair. Her hand rested lightly on the desk as she continued. "You've carried this nation on your back for 8 years, Barack. You fought battles that people will never fully understand. You don't have to fight every single one. Sometimes restraint isn't weakness, sometimes it's power." Obama leaned back, inhaling deeply, his eyes scanning the papers scattered on the desk. He stayed quiet, but there was a subtle shift in his expression, a flicker of resolve hidden beneath the weight of doubt. Michelle studied him carefully. She knew that look. She had seen it when he decided to run for president, when he made impossible choices, when history pressed against his shoulders. And she knew no matter what advice she gave, the decision would be his alone. He finally exhaled, slow and deliberate, his fingertips resting on the arm of his chair. His silence wasn't agreement, it was contemplation. But behind those thoughtful eyes, there was something else, a quiet determination beginning to rise. The study was still quiet when Obama's phone lit up on the desk, vibrating softly against the wood. He glanced at the screen. It was Malia. With a small sigh, he picked it up and put it on the speaker. "Dad," Malia's voice came through, calm and measured, the way she always spoke when she was carefully choosing her words. "You don't have to respond to him. That's what he wants. He's trying to drag you into his fight. You taught us to choose our battles. Maybe this isn't one of them." Obama leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead with his fingertips. Her words hit him like a gentle weight, pulling him towards restraint. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening, but saying nothing. Before he could answer, another voice cut in, this time sharper, younger, unafraid. "Sasha." "Dad," she said firmly, her voice carrying more emotion. "I don't agree with Malia. People need to hear your voice. You can't let him rewrite history. If you stay silent, you're letting him decide what people remember about you, about everything you stood for." There was a pause on the line, the sound of 2 daughters breathing, waiting for their father's response. Obama stared at the TV across the room where Trump's words replayed again, each one echoing louder than before. "This isn't just about you, Dad," Sasha continued, her voice cracking slightly. "This is about what's right. People still believe in you. They need you to remind them why." For a moment, Obama felt the weight of both voices pressing on him, one urging patience, the other demanding action. 2 daughters, 2 truths, one impossible choice. He finally murmured, almost to himself, "I hear you both, I really do." But deep inside, he knew that whichever path he chose would define not just his response to Trump, but his legacy. Later that night, the atmosphere inside Obama's private office shifted. The room, usually calm and orderly, was now filled with tension as his most trusted advisors gathered around the long oak table. Valerie Jarrett sat at one end, her arms crossed, her sharp gaze fixed on the stack of headlines in front of her. David Simas leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table while several former senior aides joined the discussion through a video call. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was thick, charged with unspoken disagreement. Finally, Valerie broke it. "Barack, I know you," she said firmly, locking eyes with him. "You don't need to respond to this. That's exactly what he wants. He's baiting you, pulling you into his fight. If you speak now, you risk giving him exactly what he wants: attention. Sometimes the smartest move is no move at all." Across the table, David Simas leaned forward, his voice measured but passionate. "I disagree," he said, his tone rising slightly. "This isn't just about Trump. This is about values. This is about democracy. If a sitting president can publicly tell a former president to be silent and you don't respond, it sets a dangerous precedent. People are looking to you for leadership, Barack. If you stay silent, they'll think you've surrendered." One of the former aides on the video call jumped in frustration in his voice. "David's right. If you don't push back, his version of the story becomes the story. And once that narrative takes hold, it'll be nearly impossible to undo." Valerie's face hardened, her voice steady but forceful. "And if he speaks, you know what happens next? It becomes Obama versus Trump, personal, messy, divisive. The media will feast on it, and the country will spiral deeper into chaos." The voices grew louder, overlapping frustration spilling into the room. Advisors who had been with Obama for years were now sharply divided, each side utterly convinced they were protecting his legacy. Obama sat at the head of the table, silent, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. His eyes moved between Valerie and David, listening carefully, absorbing every word. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just a strategic decision, it was a defining moment. Finally, the room quieted, everyone waiting for his response. Obama leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly, and spoke in a low, steady voice. "This isn't about me. It's about the country. I need to be sure before I decide." The advisors exchanged uneasy glances. They knew the debate wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. Within hours of Trump's statement, the entire nation seemed to split down the middle. Social media exploded into chaos, trending hashtags dominating every platform. Two battle cries emerged. "Speak Obama." Millions demanded that the former president break his silence. "We need his voice right now." One viral tweet read, gaining over 1.2 million likes in less than 3 hours. Another user posted a video in tears saying, "If Obama stays quiet, history will be rewritten by people who don't care about the truth. He has to speak." Meanwhile, on the other side of the digital battlefield, the opposing hashtag, "Stay Silent," surged just as fiercely. Supporters of restraint flooded the timelines, warning Obama not to play into Trump's strategy. "Don't take the bait," one popular post urged. "Silence is sometimes the greatest form of strength. Don't give him what he wants." Instagram Reels, TikTok videos, and YouTube live streams became battlegrounds of opinion. Influencers, activists, professors, veterans, everyone had something to say. Heated debates raged across the live stream chat, some lasting 6, 7, even 10 hours without pause. Even major news outlets picked sides. CNN, MSNBC, and The Washington Post ran headlines questioning Trump's attack and urging Obama to respond. Meanwhile, Fox News, Breitbart, and other conservative platforms blasted Obama supporters, accusing them of trying to undermine the sitting president. The country wasn't just divided anymore. It was on fire. Families clashed at dinner tables, co-workers stopped speaking, and protests began brewing in several states. A deep sense of tension gripped the nation. Everyone waited for one man to decide whether he would stay silent or speak. Across America, far from Washington's polished halls of power, ordinary people were quietly wrestling with the storm Trump had unleashed. In Phoenix, Arizona, a middle-aged teacher sat alone in her classroom after her students left. Papers were scattered on her desk, but her eyes were fixed on the small TV mounted in the corner. Trump's speech replayed again, his voice sharp and unyielding. She sighed heavily, whispering to herself, "We're losing ourselves piece by piece." Hundreds of miles away in Chicago, a group of steel workers gathered in their factory break room during lunch. The TV flickered with breaking news headlines showing images of protests erupting in major cities. No one touched their sandwiches. No one said a word. The silence was heavier than the grinding machines outside. In a New Orleans diner, an elderly couple sat side by side, holding hands tightly while watching the news on a small portable TV. Tears welled up in the woman's eyes as she whispered, "I've lived through wars, through segregation, but I've never seen America like this." Meanwhile, in a modest Kansas home, a long-haul truck driver, slammed his coffee mug onto the kitchen table. His wife looked up in surprise as he growled, "That man just told Obama to keep quiet. The hell he will." From small-town diners to crowded factories, from suburban living rooms to rural highways, the storm wasn't just on social media or in the Senate, it had reached the hearts and homes of everyday Americans. Every passing day felt like the walls were closing in on Barack Obama. The storm Trump unleashed wasn't fading, it was growing louder, fiercer, and more personal. Major news outlets opened each broadcast with the same question: will Obama finally speak? CNN ran live countdowns to rumored press conferences that never came. MSNBC aired fiery debates with analysts arguing whether Obama's silence was strategic genius or political cowardice. Meanwhile, Fox News painted a different picture, entirely accusing Obama of being scared to face the truth and claiming his silence proved Trump's point. On social media, the pressure mounted even higher. Every tweet, every meme, every live stream added fuel to the fire. The hashtags Speak Obama and Stay Silent raged like dueling armies, each commanding millions of voices. Protesters gathered outside Obama's Washington home, holding signs that screamed, "Your voice matters. History won't wait for you." Inside his private circle, tensions were no less intense. Valerie Jarrett, David Seamus, and other longtime advisors filled the conference room, their voices overlapping in heated arguments. One faction insisted silence was the only way to protect Obama's dignity and avoid falling into Trump's trap. Another faction countered, warning that silence would allow the rewriting of history. Even other political heavyweights began to weigh in. Former presidents, senators, and governors made subtle but unmistakable statements during interviews and town halls. Some urged restraint, others practically begged Obama to respond. And yet through it all, Obama remained quiet. But his silence was not passive behind closed doors. He studied reports, reviewed speeches, and held private calls with world leaders who feared the ripple effects of Trump's words. Day by day, the stakes climbed higher. The longer Obama stayed silent, the louder the nation became. By now, the pressure wasn't just political, it was existential. America wasn't just asking for his opinion, it was demanding his leadership. The room was silent except for the faint scratching of a pen. Barack Obama sat at his mahogany desk, the soft glow of a single lamp illuminating the open notebook in front of him. For hours he hadn't spoken a word. No phones, no advisors, no distractions. Just him and the impossible weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. He drew a deep breath and finally began to write, his pen moving slowly at first. This isn't about one man. This isn't about one presidency. This is about who we are as a nation. He paused, tapping the pen against the notebook, thinking carefully about every syllable. He knew one wrong word, one phrase too sharp, one sentence too emotional, and the media would twist it. Trump would weaponize it, and the country would spiral even further. Michelle walked into the room, quietly placing a cup of tea on his desk without saying a word. She glanced at the notebook, saw the opening line, and nodded softly. She didn't need to speak. She understood the war her husband was preparing for. Obama leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment. He could already hear the noise, the pundits, the headlines, the hashtags, the protests. But this speech couldn't be about ego or revenge. This had to be bigger than Trump. It had to be about America. He scribbled another line, this time firmer, more decisive. When the truth is threatened, silence is not an option. Outside the window, Washington was quiet, but deep inside the White House walls, a storm was building, and Barack Obama was about to unleash it. Inside the private conference room, the atmosphere was electric. Papers scattered across the table, laptops open, voices overlapping. Everyone had an opinion, but no one could agree. Valerie Jarrett leaned forward, tapping her pen sharply against the table. Her voice was firm, almost urgent. "We need a line that cuts through the noise, a line people will remember. What about this? Leadership isn't about silencing voices, it's about listening." The room went silent for a moment. Some nodded slowly, recognizing the power in those words. But before anyone could respond, Michelle, standing by the window with her arms crossed, spoke softly but decisively. "Barack, no names, no direct attacks. Don't give him what he wants. Focus on values, not vendettas." Obama sat back in his chair, pen in hand, absorbing every word. He knew Michelle was right. Mentioning Trump directly would hand him free ammunition. But Valerie had a point too. This speech needed punch, something that would echo across the nation and beyond. David Seamus jumped in, shaking his head. If we avoid his name, the media will call it weak. They'll say you're dodging the fight. The debate intensified. One side pushed for direct confrontation, the other for strategic restraint. Voices rose, tension climbed, and yet Obama remained calm, quietly taking notes while the storm raged around him. Finally, he raised a hand, signaling for silence. "We're not writing this for cable news. We're writing it for history," he said, his voice steady, almost cold. The room froze. In that single sentence, Obama had set the tone. This wasn't about Trump anymore. It was about America's soul. The White House was silent, but inside Obama's private study, the air was thick with tension. A single lamp burned in the corner, casting a soft golden light across stacks of drafts, crumpled papers, and open notebooks scattered on the floor. Barack Obama paced slowly, a pen in one hand, the first draft of his speech in the other. He read a paragraph out loud softly at first, then firmer, testing the weight of the words as if feeling their power. "No, that's too defensive," he muttered under his breath, striking through the sentence with a sharp motion of his pen. He sat down again, scribbled a new line, then immediately crossed it out. Over and over the cycle repeated. Write, erase, rewrite, reread. His frustration mounted, but he refused to settle for anything less than perfection. Every phrase had to serve a purpose. Every word had to land with precision. Every sentence carried the weight of history. At one point, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples exhausted. Michelle peeked in through the door, her eyes filled with quiet concern, but she didn't say a word. She understood that tonight this battle wasn't hers to fight. It was his. Outside, Washington was asleep, but inside these walls, Obama was wrestling with America's identity, its divisions, and its future. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "This can't just be another speech, it has to be a turning point." The clock struck 2:47 a.m., and still his pen moved his lips, murmuring every line. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the truth. By morning, millions would be waiting for his words, and one wrong sentence could change everything. The notification hit every major news outlet at 6:03 p.m. sharp. Within seconds, the headline dominated television screens, news apps, and social media feeds. Breaking: Barack Obama to address the nation in live primetime speech. Inside the Obama residence in Washington, reporters swarmed the gates, cameras rolling, microphones ready. Phones buzzed endlessly as networks scrambled to confirm the story. By 6:10 p.m., hashtags were already trending worldwide. Obama speaks history in the making America nudge. On Twitter, a political analyst wrote, "This isn't just another statement. This could redefine the balance of power." Cable news networks broke into emergency coverage. Fox News called it the speech that could shake Washington. CNN labeled it a historic turning point. MSNBC promised unfiltered truth live. Outside a coffee shop in Seattle, an older veteran set his newspaper down and whispered to no one in particular, "He's coming back. He's really coming back." In Phoenix, a group of college students gathered around a laptop watching the news feed explode in real time. "This is it," one of them muttered. "Something big is coming." Everywhere from rural Kansas diners to New York penthouses, people were glued to their screens, united by one overwhelming feeling: anticipation. Obama had stayed silent for weeks, but now he was about to break it, and the entire nation was holding its breath. The studio was silent. The soft golden glow of the lights washed gently over Barack Obama's face as he sat at the desk, his hands folded neatly in front of him. Behind him, the American flag hung motionless, illuminated by a faint backlight. The room was so quiet that you could hear the faint hum of the cameras. Millions of Americans were watching. Every channel, every live stream, every social media feed, all focused on him. He took a deep breath, his eyes steady, his jaw set. For weeks he had remained silent while the storm around him grew louder and louder. But tonight there was no turning back. Obama leaned slightly toward the microphone and began his voice low, controlled, and deliberate. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight." A pause. His eyes scanned the camera, connecting with every viewer as if he were speaking directly to each of them. But silence is no longer an option. In that instant, the entire nation seemed to freeze. In Chicago, a retired teacher clasped her hands together, whispering, "Please say what we need to hear." In Texas, a group of factory workers gathered around a dusty old TV, holding their breath. In New York, thousands streamed the speech live in Times Square, where giant screens displayed Obama's face solemn and unyielding. Twitter exploded within seconds. Obama speaks turning point history, unfolds, everyone knew it. This wasn't just another political speech. This was the moment that could change everything. From New York to Texas, from California to the Midwest, millions of Americans sat frozen in front of their screens, hanging on to every single word. Obama's voice carried weight, steady, deep, deliberate. Each sentence felt like a hammer striking against decades of silence. Democracy, he said, his voice calm but resolute, is not the property of one person or one party. It belongs to the people. In a small apartment in Brooklyn, an elderly woman pressed a trembling hand to her lips as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Finally, someone is saying it," she whispered. In Dallas, a group of veterans at a local bar stood up together when Obama spoke about sacrifice. Our freedom was built on voices, not silence. The room erupted in applause, glasses clinking as they shouted "Amen." At a high school gymnasium in Phoenix, hundreds of students crowded around a projector streaming the speech live. One girl whispered to her friend, This is history happening right now." Social media exploded again, this time not with division, but with unity. Posts flooded Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok with people quoting Obama word for word. Leadership isn't about power. It's about responsibility. When truth is attacked, silence is betrayal. Some viewers wiped their tears, others typed furiously, making sure these words would live on. For the first time in weeks, the entire country, red states, blue states, rich, poor, young, old, felt connected. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was about America. The next morning, chaos erupted inside the White House. Donald Trump stormed into the Oval Office, his face flushed red with anger, his aides scrambling behind him. The TV screens were replaying Obama's speech on every major news network, clips of his words going viral across TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. Trump slammed his hand on the desk. "Turn that off. I don't want to hear his voice again," he barked. Within minutes, his phone was in his hand, and the tweets started flying one after another, faster than his staff could react. "Obama is weak, a failed president who destroyed America, totally fake leadership. Sad." The social media storm grew instantly. Fox News ran a flashing headline, "Trump fires back," while CNN reported, "White House in crisis mode after Obama's speech." Inside the communications war room, senior aides argued fiercely, "We need to control the narrative," one strategist shouted. "No, we need to hit back harder," another snapped. Meanwhile, Trump paced the Oval Office, furious that Obama's words were dominating every conversation in America. He grabbed his phone again and dictated another message. "No one has done more for this country than me. Obama had his chance, he failed. Now he wants to lecture us, pathetic." By noon, Trump had tweeted over 40 times, triggering headlines everywhere. But instead of weakening Obama's impact, his anger only fueled the story further. By the afternoon, the White House briefing room was packed wall to wall. Reporters from CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and dozens of other outlets filled every seat, their cameras locked on the podium. Suddenly, the doors burst open. Donald Trump walked in briskly, his signature red tie swinging slightly, his face still flushed with anger. He didn't wait for the press secretary. He didn't wait for questions. He went straight to the microphone. "That speech," he paused, letting his words hang heavy in the air, his hands gesturing widely, "was weak, completely weak." The room fell silent for a brief moment before the clicking of cameras exploded like machine gun fire. "People keep talking about how powerful Obama's words were," Trump continued, pointing at the cameras. "But let me tell you something. It was nothing but empty poetry, beautiful lies, no solutions, no action, just words." One reporter from NBC shouted, "Mr. President, polls show the majority of Americans support Obama's statement. How do you respond?" Trump leaned forward, smirked, and shot back, "Yeah, well, fake polls by fake media. You guys want a president who talks and a president who acts. Big difference." Gasps rippled through the room. Some journalists whispered to each other, while others frantically typed updates. Outside the briefing room, millions watched the broadcast live. Twitter trended instantly, "Trump press meltdown," "Obama vs. Trump, America divided for Trump." This was supposed to be a counterattack, but instead his fiery words poured gasoline on an already raging fire. Within hours of Trump's fiery press conference, clips comparing Obama and Trump flooded the internet. On TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, side-by-side videos showed a striking contrast. Obama's speech, calm, measured, inspiring. His tone carried the weight of wisdom and unity. Every sentence felt deliberate, every pause intentional. He spoke of values, responsibility, and leadership. Trump's response, loud, combative, filled with insults. His hands waved wildly, his voice cracked with frustration, and his words attacked rather than reassured. A viral tweet summed it up perfectly. One man leads, the other shouts, 1.8M like 600K retweets. Hashtags dominated the trends. True leadership Obama speaks, Trump meltdown. Even conservative-leaning voters started questioning Trump's approach. A caller on a Texas radio station said, "I've supported Trump for years, but watching him today, he looked desperate, not presidential." On CNN, political analyst Donna Bash commented, "Obama spoke like a statesman. Trump sounded like a man cornered." By evening, polls from independent agencies showed a stunning shift. 62% of Americans said Obama's message resonated with them, while only 28% agreed with Trump's rebuttal. The narrative was changing fast. What Trump had hoped would be a show of dominance had instead painted him as unstable and reactionary. And for the first time in years, the word leader was being attached to Obama's name far more than Trump's. The morning after Obama's speech, the ripple effects had already reached every corner of the globe. International headlines blazed with a single word: historic. In London, The Guardian published a front-page editorial: "Obama's voice has returned and the world is listening." In Berlin, Der Spiegel described it as a turning point in modern American leadership. And in Tokyo, Asahi Shimbun called it the speech that could reshape U.S. politics for decades. Television networks across Europe, Asia, and South America ran live segments analyzing every word Obama had said, frame by frame, tone by tone. Analysts debated its implications, not just for America, but for global diplomacy and democracy itself. Foreign leaders also began weighing in. The French president issued a statement. Obama reminded the world that America's true strength lies in unity and dignity. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tweeted, "Leadership is about lifting people up, not tearing them apart." Obama reminded us of that today. Over 900,000 likes in just a few hours. Hashtags like Obama returns, historic speech, and global leadership dominated Twitter worldwide, trending in over 50 countries simultaneously. In Beijing, a political commentator on CCTV remarked, "This moment proves that America is still a nation capable of reinventing itself if it listens to the right voices." For the first time in years, the world wasn't reacting to Trump's tweets, but to Obama's words. The balance of political gravity had shifted not just in Washington, but on the entire global stage. Obama's words didn't just echo inside the White House briefing room. They ignited a movement. Within hours, his speech became the center of conversations in classrooms, churches, and community halls across America. In Atlanta, a high school history teacher paused in front of her class, replaying the moment Obama said, "Leadership isn't about silencing voices. It's about listening." She turned to her students and said softly, This is why history matters. Because words like these can change it." In Dallas, Pastor Michael Evans stood before his congregation, his voice trembling with emotion as he quoted Obama's speech, "Truth, courage, and respect. These are the foundations of a nation." The entire church erupted in applause, some wiping away tears. Across Detroit, Philadelphia, and Phoenix, community leaders and activists began holding small rallies. They carried posters with Obama's words printed in bold truth. Courage, respect. For many, it wasn't just about politics anymore. It became personal about what kind of country they wanted to live in. On social media, TikTok and Instagram flooded with short clips of Obama's speech. Young creators stitched his words into their videos, while older generations wrote heartfelt posts reflecting on what those words meant to them. An activist in Chicago put it best during a televised interview. "Sometimes a single sentence can wake up an entire nation. Tonight, Obama gave us that sentence. The power of words had become undeniable, and the country was no longer the same." The nation held its breath as Obama delivered the final lines of his historic speech. The camera zoomed in on his face, calm, steady, unshaken. His voice was firm but warm, carrying the weight of decades of service, sacrifice, and silent battles. He paused, scanning the crowd, allowing the silence to settle like gravity. Then, with the faintest hint of a smile, he spoke the words that would be remembered for generations. True leadership isn't about making others silent, it's about giving them a voice. The room erupted. Some rose to their feet. Others wiped away tears they didn't realize were falling. Across the country, from small-town diners in Ohio to crowded subways in New York, people stopped what they were doing to listen. This wasn't just a response to Trump. It was a reminder, a call to the very soul of America. On Twitter, the quote instantly became the most shared sentence in the nation. Posters, murals, and digital banners popped up overnight, bearing his words in bold, unshakable letters. True leadership isn't about making others silent, it's about giving them a voice. For many Americans, it wasn't about red or blue anymore. It wasn't about Democrats versus Republicans. It was about something far deeper, the values that define who they are as a people. In that moment, Barack Obama didn't just answer Trump. He reminded the country of who they were and who they still could be. This story reminds us of one powerful truth: real leadership is not about control, it's about courage, integrity, and giving others a voice. In life, we will all face moments where staying silent feels safe, but silence often allows injustice to grow. True strength comes from standing up for what's right, even when the world is divided. Obama's speech wasn't just about politics. It was about who we are as individuals, as a community, and as a nation. It's a reminder that our voices matter, and when we use them to speak truth, we shape the future. No matter where you are in life, your voice carries power. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Stand up, speak up, be heard. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Hit the subscribe button. Give this video a like, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, and together we can create a community that fights for justice, truth, and hope.